Well, hello, Emily Sutton. We're so lucky to have you here. Emily, when you speak, I bet that our listeners will recognize your voice.
Maybe. Yeah, no, I was honored to be asked to do the voiceover, and I've told the team before that was actually one of my first like childhood career dreams. I didn't want to be a Disney princess. Uh I wanted to voice like the Swan Princess or like the warrior princesses. So
Yes,
I definitely felt that connect a bit to my childhood.
that is so great. Emily, would you share with our listeners who may not have met you yet a little bit about your role and background?
Sure. So my name's Emily Sutton. I am the Director of Marketing for Community Financial Credit Union. I lead the strategic side of the creative team and work with some of the most epic humans ever. And I've been here for 5 years now. Before that, I was much more in the association world and some healthcare. So it's been some kind of popping along until I feel like I've finally found that solid space in credit unions, which you're stuck with me is really where we're at.
We're so thrilled about that. When we were talking a little bit about your history, so Third Fork, I've had some people ask me why Third Fork, and it's really about sometimes you sit down early stage in your career and your adventures, and you don't know what all these silverware are and when you use them and which plate when. And you got lessons about that early in your life, it sounds like.
I did. So when I heard the name of the podcast, I immediately in my head was like, "Oh, it's your salad fork or your dessert fork, isn't it?" I had a amazing grandmother. Her name was Joyce. She came from Suffolk, England, and came over here to Canada first, met my grandfather on a blind date, and then had my mom and her siblings. And she was very big, in very cliche fashion on the etiquette piece of growing up.
Yeah.
So I definitely had the proper settings on tables and had books on my head at many a point and did all the tea parties. So it was this connected very well. I'm like, this one I can answer.
That's so great. Have you been able to impart that knowledge with others? I know for a lot of people, that's very novel. So you were really lucky to learn that early.
It actually came in handy when I was in college. I ended up joining a sorority, not the initial plan, but I did end up joining a sorority, and part of what we wanted to work on was etiquette at one point, and so I helped
Oh,
lead those because I'm like, I know what this is supposed to be. Yay, years of experience coming together.
yeah.
And that experience, actually, just the sorority life in general, was a great bouncing off point for board structures and
Yeah.
leadership connections and everything else. So ended up serving quite a bit throughout.
Awesome. Can you talk about one of your early lessons, maybe a question that you had in your early phase of your career and you weren't sure who to go to? How did you decide who to go to? What did you learn? And what advice would you give from that?
I think one of the biggest things that I had was this sense of hesitancy
Hmm.
to speak to leaders or people that in the moment, felt like I had no business talking to in
Mm-hmm.
any way, shape, or form. Um, what I ended up doing was building relationships with the people around me a bit
Hmm.
and finding those moments of comfort to be able to guide me to less of that anxiety.
Yeah,
So it'd
yeah,
either be a manager, another leader, or someone who I connected with who had been at that organization for a little bit longer. And then just natural connection points of building relationships kind of helped ease some of that tension away. But it was definitely, I'm doing work to support this person. They've asked me to do it, but if I have a question, can I ask or can I not ask? It was definitely the back and forth of having to figure that out.
yeah. Well, with that question, what advice would you give to somebody newer in their career about when to ask, when to wait, who to ask?
I think it depends on the task at hand. It's
Mm,
being able to tell the priority level or the timeliness of what's been asked. I always try to lead with problem solving first. So
hmm.
seeing if I can figure it out or go to somebody I know who does this and get the way that maybe that leader likes to have it done. But if it's something that for relationship building or priority level has to happen really quickly, then I'm just going to go and ask because that's easier than waiting and being anxious and hesitating and not getting something done as quickly.
Mm. How do you build connection with a colleague that might be in a higher level role and you've got some nerves about that? What are some of the ways that you've been able to create that relationship?
What I've genuinely found, and I've been really blessed to work with a lot of incredible leaders. So I know that for some, this may not be their reality. For me, though, it was just being my own authentic self, finding moments of warmth and connection. And even if it wasn't job related, if it was just being a part of a conversation, those like quote unquote water cooler moments
Mm,
that created a lot less hesitancy because in the end we're all people working towards one goal. So finding those moments of authentic warmth and connection and joy, I think were really important.
mm. Emily, when you think about that in a digital world where people might not be in person all the time, how do you make that happen when you might not run into people at a official water cooler?
Yeah. I feel like I've got a unique take on this because my background is in social media and while I'm in that interesting space of born when there was no technology or emerging technology and now it's like our full world is so interspersed. Um, I had enough of a buildup and connection to digital spaces to just reach out to folks and just
Mm,
to make connections and try to transplant who I was into those virtual spaces, but that's not natural for everybody. So I
mm,
think there's a lot that great organizations do with whether it's like virtual happy hour things
mm,
or if it's just finding moments of connection in a meeting with somebody. It's trying to find those spaces because regardless, it can be awkward if you're someone who relies on like body language
mm,
to see that translated. It's definitely at least in my experience, a practice makes perfect type of
mm.
process, but you have to be a little fearless and just throw yourself into it. If you hold off and think people don't want to talk to me, then you're not going to talk to anybody.
Yeah. You do have a really interesting perspective having led social and having done so much work in the digital space. What advice would you give to young professionals about their social media presence and how to do that in a way that's going to honor their work?
Uh, I don't want this to make like to scare anybody, but it very much is a be the person online that you are in real life. But like
Mm-hmm.
put the image out there that you want to portray and who is closest to who you are genuinely. Um, and there is a level of caution I'd like to put out there because we have seen
Mm-hmm.
instances where you post something and the next minute it goes viral and not in the best way. So I'd take a pause and take a moment before anything gets posted to think about what that looks like, even years down the line. As much as, like, I hate to say that for kids in college or anyone emerging and trying to figure out who they are, there is a permanency to the internet, and the internet is forever, is the line. So if you're proud to post it, go for it. Be your true, authentic self. Create content that feels magical to you, and really put yourself out there. But it has to be reflective of what your dreams and your goals are and where that's going to take you. And you don't want anything that you're putting to hinder any of those pathways for yourself.
Mm. How would you advise somebody early stage to build their LinkedIn profile?
Finding those professional organizations and meeting people is going to be a big one. And
Mm,
finding people that you connect with and can celebrate along the way and be visual as you are celebrating them
mm,
is massively important. I think finding ways to not just share content, but build your own content is huge too, so that it's more representations of your voice and why your voice matters versus just regurgitating infographics and just other spaces that everyone else is. You got to differentiate, and I think that's kind of the bigger piece. LinkedIn also does a really great job connecting professional spaces. So just incorporate and be part of the conversation. If something drives you, talk about it, go for it. You're going to find other people who love what you love. So why not?
Emily, I've heard people say, they might be in a field like finance, or in our world, maybe they're in lending, and it might not be a space where they've had as much practice with social, or in particular LinkedIn. For those that are early stage in their career with a focus in subject matter expertise, it's not directly tied to communications. How would you advise them to dip their toes in the water?
My favorite example that I think we both can love, is Scott Cameron.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
He was very, when we first were pushing for leaders to really be more present, really took to it and took the time to, like any great human would, to ask questions and make sure he was doing it the right way, but then did his own spin on it. So when he's like basically using his Excel cup to hide his face because that makes him more comfortable, and you're following the journey of the dry wit and humor that is Scott Cameron and his Excel formula cup, that creates a journey. That creates an interesting character that people want to follow. And that's very much inherently Scott as well. So it's
Mhm.
just finding those spaces that just, and just finding your voice. I think that's just the biggest thing. It's just finding who you are and just utilizing that to its fullest. And like I know Tansy, like you do that like so incredibly well. So it's again, major fan of Scott and just finding those spaces to write content like you do or post like the journey of leadership like Scott does. There's so many options.
Love that. You've grown in your leadership at Community Financial. I wonder, I bet we have some folks that are listening and watching that are very eager to become leaders. When you think about that transition from being an individual contributor, being a subject matter expert, and then moving into leadership roles, what's some of the advice that you would give for somebody who's driving toward that?
Be fearless. That's the biggest thing that I can say. I think there are going to be times when people see you, and I think that that's beautiful. And you have to recognize when those moments are happening and like cling to them. But you have to fight for yourself along the way
Mhm.
too. And that can look different across the board. Um, but for my case, I just wanted to take every challenge that I could see and I wanted to help in any way that I could. And I wanted to make sure that we were as successful as we could be. And I just, if you put your heart and your care behind it, even if you're feeling like such nerves or like, I don't deserve this. What, like, I don't even know if I should go for this. Push past it
Mhm.
because taking the chance is always worth it because even if you don't progress, it shows those who are watching that you're interested in that path. So
Mhm.
regardless, I just wouldn't let fear stop you. If you have someone great who you can talk to, who can help push you over the edge, or if you are a person who loves that like butterflies in your stomach feeling, like just go for it. That's
Mhm.
all I can say.
That's great. I often ask our guests about skinning their knees because all of us make mistakes. Could you share a time where you maybe didn't have success, or maybe things didn't go the way that you wish they would, and talk a little bit about what you learned?
Yeah. I had quite a few of those moments in my early days when I was figuring out what it meant to be a professional. And I think the biggest thing that I can talk to is accountability.
Mm,
I think as, and this becomes like a very big conversation, but I think as a society, we are taught to avoid the negative feelings, to
mm,
avoid the discomfort, to avoid anything that puts us on our hackles a little bit. And I
mhm,
definitely fell into that category when I first got started. I wanted to be great. I wanted to be the best worker ever. But when I stumbled, it was harder for me in that moment to say, shoot, I did that. Let me take it. I tried
mhm,
at first to like say, well, if it had been this way or it had been that way, that would have been it, then it wouldn't have been my fault. And it just, that does nothing. It
mhm,
doesn't, A, help you learn as you move forward, and it doesn't grow or fix anything. So
Mhm.
that's, I think, been one of the biggest transformations is just be accountable. When
Mhm.
something goes wrong, just own it and come with what the solution is so that it doesn't happen again next time and use it as that learning opportunity.
What made you recognize that that was so important?
Fully, it made me incredibly uncomfortable to try to feel like I was wiggling out of something.
Uh,
And having people that I trusted who were either leaders at the time or colleagues be like, what were you doing? So like having people who I trusted like calling it out a little bit also like validated that I'm like, ugh, that felt icky and I should have just sunk into that feeling and used it as something to propel me forward, even if it's skin knees doesn't always feel good, but it's a solid reminder that there's a different path forward and that you can heal from it.
mhm. We started out talking a little bit about that third fork, and you've been to some credit union conferences. If you were giving advice to one of our listeners about attending a credit union conference, about engaging, what are one or two things that you think are really important to know?
Oh, just do it.
Yeah.
Like immediately.
Yeah.
Uh, every interaction that I've had with credit union human beings has been beautiful. And that's the only way that I know how to say it. They are the kindest, most caring, funniest, just most incredible group of humans that truly just make, at least in my experience, I felt a sense of, and we use this word, but I really felt a sense of belonging. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
snap, my people. I found like that spot where it feels cozy, but they also drive you to move forward. So it's go to the conferences, talk to everybody, because you never know what connections you may already have or things that interest you, and just enjoy it. Be so present in the moment. That's all I can say.
Mhm. You mentioned something that's really interesting. When you start to build connections and ultimately then build a network that people talk about, what are some of the ways that you take an event like attending a credit union conference and then move that into a set of connections that last for a longer period of time?
So this is something that my mom was fantastic at.
Ooh.
And she is my total idol in this respect. She has been in the healthcare strategic space for my entire lifespan. And what I've always watched her do and seen her just master is the art of caring, is
Mhm.
the art of follow-up, is the art of checking in and maintaining and being present no matter how long it's been since she's seen somebody.
Mhm.
I've seen people that she's known for my entire lifespan who actively know what's going on with my life or who come to my baby showers or who are like so ingrained in who we are and even outside of that just taking the time and space for people to see them
Mhm.
that lasts more than anything. So
Yeah.
it's just beautiful. So like in those respects, I try to be like my mom. I just try to care and I try to check up and follow up. And I'm not near as perfect as she is, but it's just genuinely caring about people and being there, even when it's been a while, just like
Yeah.
checking in and seeing how things are going.
Love that. Do you have any hacks for how you remember things across a wider network? Do you keep things in your phone? Do you have a brain that remembers all those details? What do you do to make sure you can stay connected and caring?
It's a mix. I definitely just actively stay present on social, which is just
Yeah.
part of my nerddom. I'm fully on socials every single day. It's too ingrained in who I am. I'm actively following everybody and will comment and follow up or send DMs or text folks when I can. Um, a lot of it also is I have my notes on my phone of like, this is so and so's birthday. This
Mm,
is when we first met. They love this thing, but a lot of it is much more tied to like hysterical stories that I have in my head of moments that meant something big to me or big nerdy connection points that we had. So like that's Crashers from Big Bright Minds. It's all below deck themed. Like it's just moments of anything and everything can mean a moment of connection. So you don't have to wait for the big days. You can find the small little moments too. And that sometimes I think means more to people than the birthday reach outs or
mm,
some of the larger stuff.
awesome. What's the best piece of advice you received in the early days of your career that served you well for years to come?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I got was just, and I've said it, I guess, throughout this conversation a little bit, but is to just go for it. You
Mhm.
know more than you think you do. You are worth more than you think you're worth. Especially as a young woman, I definitely have run into that imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
uh, feeling quite a bit, and finding the moment to just ignore the twisting of knots in my stomach and just say, I'm worth it, and not to put the think in it. Just go
Mhm.
for it. And regardless, then still be okay with the no. It's just a try. That's the biggest thing that I learned from past leaders, and it's just been vital as I've kept going. That and just the importance of relationships, which again, from my mom, from other people that I've run into, they all matter. Everything matters, every interaction, and not in a self-serving way. Meeting people along your life journey is just so beautiful. You never know what someone's going to mean to you.
What haven't I asked you that I should have?
I just, I think recognizing the power of people is something that's so cool.
Mhm.
And I think recognizing how beautiful differences are
Mhm.
is a big thing too. People don't always have to agree with you, and you can think that you have this incredible idea, but listening is even more important. I think that's the big thing too for me is to kind of, in no other words, just shut up and actively listen because you don't know what you're going to learn from folks, and it may change what you think about how you want to do something, what you think the right way is. It's incredible when you're really actively listening to somebody because we all don't know everything, and no matter where we're at. And it's it's a beautiful thing about life when you like really stop and just listen to what's going on around you.
Stay curious. That's what I'm hearing. Stay curious.
100%. Yep.
Well, Emily, thank you for joining us. We're so lucky to have you on our team, and you've given our audience some amazing insights today.
Thank you so much, Tansley. This has been such an honor, and I love still being the voice of the podcast. But the other time you need me,
Yes.
you just let me know.
We'll have you back for sure.
Love it. Thank you for your curiosity, Tansley. I really, really, really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks, my friend.